No one in the city noticed the little alien girl at first. She moved on all fours behind the garbage stalls, quietly picking through rotten food and broken containers. People thought she was just another stray animal trying to survive the night. Some shopkeepers even shouted at her and threw water to chase her away. But the strange thing was, she never fought back. She only lowered her head and crawled away, like she had already learned that the world was cruel. Every night, when the market closed, the streets of Harbor District became dark and silent. The smell of old fish and spoiled vegetables filled the air. That was when the girl appeared. Small, thin, and covered in dust, she searched through piles of trash with shaking hands. Sometimes she found a piece of bread. Sometimes only bones. And when she ate, she didn't eat like a child. She ate like a starving dog. She kept her head low and her eyes wide, always watching the shadows, as if someone was hunting her. But no one in the market cared enough to look closely. No one. Except one man. His name was Daniel. Daniel worked the night shift cleaning the old cargo docks nearby. Every evening after work, he walked through the market to take a shortcut home. It was faster, but it was also quiet, and Daniel liked quiet places. He had lived alone for years, and silence felt normal to him. One cold night, while passing by the trash alley, Daniel heard something strange. Not the sound of rats, not the sound of cats. It was crying. Very soft, very weak. Daniel stopped walking. At first, he thought maybe it was just the wind moving through broken boxes. But then he heard it again. A small whimper, like a child trying not to be heard. His heart tightened. Slowly, Daniel stepped closer to the alley. "Hello?" he called gently. The crying stopped immediately. The alley became silent again. Daniel walked a few steps forward, pushing aside a stack of empty crates. The dim streetlight barely reached the ground, but he could see movement near a pile of garbage bags. And then he saw her. A tiny figure crouched on the ground. At first, Daniel thought it was just a homeless kid. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and her hair was tangled like she hadn't washed in weeks. She was holding a piece of old meat she had pulled from the trash, but something about the way she moved felt wrong. She wasn't sitting like a child. She was crouched low, almost crawling, her fingers gripping the ground like claws. And when Daniel stepped closer, the girl reacted instantly. She bared her teeth. A quiet, frightened growl escaped her throat. Daniel froze. His heart started beating faster. Children didn't growl. Hey, it's okay, Daniel said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. The girl's eyes locked onto him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the streetlight shifted, and Daniel finally saw her face clearly. His breath caught in his throat. Her eyes were glowing, not brightly like a lamp, but faintly, like two small stars hidden in the dark. Daniel blinked, thinking maybe he was just tired, but when he looked again, the glow was still there. The girl quickly grabbed the rotten food and tried to crawl deeper into the shadows, like she wanted to disappear. "Wait," Daniel said quickly. The girl stopped. She turned her head slowly, watching him with fear and suspicion. Daniel knelt down carefully so he wouldn't look threatening. "You don't have to eat that," he said quietly. "It's spoiled." Girl didn't answer. She only stared. Her glowing eyes studied every movement Daniel made, and that was when Daniel noticed something else. Her hands. They looked almost human, but the fingers were slightly longer, and the skin had faint silver lines running across it, like tiny veins of light under the surface. Daniel's mind raced. What was this child? Where had she come from? Before he could say anything else, the girl suddenly flinched. Her head turned sharply toward the street, as if she had heard something far away. Daniel listened to. At first, he heard nothing. Then, faintly, the sound of engines. Heavy engines. Vehicles. Moving through the night, the girl's body began to shake. Real fear filled her glowing eyes now. Without warning, she dropped the piece of meat and scrambled toward the back of the alley, trying to hide behind the garbage containers. Daniel stood up quickly. "What's wrong?" he asked. The girl didn't answer. She only curled herself into a tight ball behind the trash pile. Trembling like a hunted animal, the engines grew louder. Headlights appeared at the end of the street. 3 black vehicles rolled slowly into the market road. Daniel frowned. Something about them felt wrong. The windows were dark. The engines were almost silent. And when the doors opened, the men who stepped out didn't look like police. They wore long dark coats, and strange metallic devices glowed faintly on their wrists. One of them spoke into a communicator. Target signal confirmed, the man said calmly. The royal blood is nearby. Daniel's stomach dropped. Royal blood? He slowly turned his head toward the trash pile, where the small girl was hiding. Her glowing eyes peeked out from the shadows. And for the first time, Daniel realized something terrifying. Those men weren't searching the city. They were hunting her. Daniel's heart began to pound harder with every passing second. He stood in the middle of the dark alley, pretending to look normal, but his eyes kept moving toward the black vehicles at the end of the street. The men who stepped out were not ordinary people. Their movements were slow, controlled, and confident. Like hunters who already knew their prey had nowhere to run. One of the men lifted a small glowing device from his wrist. It hummed softly, sending thin blue waves into the air. Signal is strong, the man said quietly. She is very close. Daniel felt a cold chill run down his spine. They were talking about the girl. Behind the garbage containers, the little alien girl curled tighter into herself. Her glowing eyes were wide with terror, and her small hands were shaking. She pressed her back against the dirty wall as if she wanted to disappear into it. Daniel swallowed. He didn't understand what was happening, but one thing was clear. Those men were not here to help her. The leader stepped forward slowly. His coat moved with the cold wind as he scanned the dark alley. Spread out, he ordered calmly. Search every corner. 3 of the men immediately began walking toward the market alleys. Closer. Daniel's single quotes, his mind raced. If they walked just a few more steps, they would see the girl hiding behind the trash. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, blocking the narrow entrance of the alley. Hey! Daniel called out. The men stopped. 4 pairs of cold eyes turned toward him. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the leader walked closer, studying Daniel carefully. This area is restricted tonight, the man said in a calm but threatening voice. You should leave. Daniel forced a nervous smile. Restricted? He replied. This is a public market. I walk through here every night. The man didn't smile back. Instead, he lifted the glowing device again. The screen flickered, and the signal suddenly spiked. The man's eyes narrowed. Interesting, he murmured. Daniel felt sweat forming on his forehead. Behind him, the girl shifted slightly, making the faintest sound. Daniel quickly coughed loudly, trying to hide it. Look, he said, pretending to be annoyed. I just finished work. I'm tired. Can you move your cars so I can pass? For a second, the men seemed unsure, but the device in the leader's hand beeped again. Stronger. The signal was almost directly behind Daniel. Now, the man's gaze slowly moved past Daniel's shoulder toward the trash containers. Daniel's stomach dropped. He needed to act. Now. Suddenly, Daniel kicked over a metal garbage can beside him. It crashed loudly onto the ground, spilling trash everywhere. Damn it! Daniel shouted angrily. Look what you made me do. The loud noise echoed through the empty market. At the same moment, several stray cats that had been hiding nearby jumped out and ran across the street, knocking over more boxes and crates. Alley exploded with movement. The device in the leader's hand began flickering wildly as signals bounced everywhere. What the? One of the men muttered. Interference, another said quickly. Daniel kept complaining loudly, acting like a frustrated worker. No, I have to clean all this again. You scared the animals. The leader frowned at the chaotic signals on his device. For a moment, he hesitated. And that moment was enough. Behind Daniel, the little alien girl quietly crawled along the wall, moving deeper into the shadows. She moved so silently that even Daniel almost didn't hear her. Slowly, she disappeared behind a stack of crates At the far end of the alley, Daniel kept talking loudly, distracting the men. Finally, the leader lowered his device. "The signal is unstable," he said. "It may have moved." One of the hunters glanced down the street. "Should we check the next block?" The leader looked at Daniel one last time. His cold eyes studied him carefully, like he was trying to read his thoughts. For a second, Daniel thought the man had figured everything out. But then the leader turned away. "Search the surrounding streets," he ordered. The men returned to their vehicles. Within seconds, the black cars slowly drove away into the darkness. The sound of their engines faded down the road. The market became quiet again. Daniel stood still for several long seconds, making sure they were really gone. Only then did he release the breath he had been holding. He quickly turned around. The alley looked empty. "Hey," Daniel whispered softly. "It's safe now." At first, nothing moved. Then, from behind the crates, two faint glowing eyes appeared. The little alien girl slowly crawled back into the weak light. She was still shaking. Daniel knelt down again, speaking gently. "They're gone," he said. "You're okay." The girl stared at him for a long moment. Her breathing was slow and uneven, like she had been running for days without rest. When something surprising happened, very slowly, she moved closer. Step by step, still watching him carefully, until she was only a few feet away. Daniel could see her clearly now. She was even thinner than he first thought. Her arms looked fragile, and small cuts covered her skin. The silver lines beneath her skin glowed faintly, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. She looked exhausted. Starving. And completely alone. Daniel reached into his bag and pulled out the sandwich he had saved from work. He placed it gently on the ground between them. "Here," he said softly. The girl looked at the sandwich, then back at Daniel. For a moment, she didn't move, but hunger was stronger than fear. Slowly, she crawled forward and grabbed the food. She devoured it in seconds. Daniel watched quietly. But as she lifted her head again, something caught his attention. Her glowing eyes had changed. They were no longer just glowing. Now they were shining brighter, almost golden. And deep inside those eyes, Daniel saw something unexpected. Not just fear, not just hunger. Something else. Something powerful. Something ancient. And Daniel suddenly realized something that made his blood run cold. Those men weren't simply chasing a strange alien child. They were chasing someone incredibly important. The little alien girl finished the sandwich in seconds. Daniel had never seen anyone eat that fast before. It was not greed. It was survival. Every bite looked like something she had fought hard to get in the past. When the last piece was gone, she looked down at her empty hands, as if hoping more food might appear. Daniel felt a tight pain in his chest. "You must be really hungry," he said quietly. The girl didn't answer. She was still watching him carefully, her glowing golden eyes studying every small movement he made. It was the way a wild animal watched a stranger, ready to run at any second. Daniel slowly reached into his bag again. This time, he pulled out a bottle of water. He gently placed it on the ground and slid it toward her. "It's just water," he said softly. The girl sniffed the bottle suspiciously, as if checking if it was safe. After a moment, she grabbed it with both hands and drank quickly. Some of the water spilled down her chin, but she didn't care. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and looked at Daniel again. For the first time, the fear in her eyes seemed slightly smaller. Daniel gave a small, careful smile. "My name is Daniel," he said, pointing to himself. The girl tilted her head. It looked like she was trying to understand. "Daniel," he repeated slowly. The girl stayed silent for several seconds. Then she touched her chest lightly. Lyra? Her voice was soft and strange, almost like she was not used to speaking human language. Daniel blinked. "Lyra?" he repeated gently. The girl nodded once. For a brief moment, the alley felt less frightening. But the peace did not last long. Suddenly, Lyra's eyes widened. Her body stiffened. She turned her head sharply toward the dark sky above the market. Daniel looked up too, confused. At first he saw nothing. Just clouds moving slowly across the night sky. Then, a faint humming sound filled the air. Low, mechanical, and getting louder. Lyra's breathing became fast again. She grabbed Daniel's sleeve suddenly. Her fingers were small, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "Hide," she whispered urgently. Daniel frowned. "What?" But then the humming sound grew stronger. The clouds above the city slowly began to glow with a pale blue light. Daniel's eyes widened. Something huge was moving behind the clouds. A shadow, massive and silent. Lyra pulled his sleeve harder. "They found me," she whispered, her voice shaking. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. Before he could ask anything else, the shadow in the sky shifted. A large triangular spacecraft slowly appeared between the clouds. It was enormous. Cold blue lights glowed along its metal surface. The ship floated silently above the city, like a predator watching the ground below. Daniel felt the air around him grow colder. "What is that?" he whispered. Lyra's eyes filled with fear. "Hunters." At that exact moment, several thin beams of blue light shot down from the spacecraft, scanning different parts of the city. Buildings, roads, alleys, searching. Daniel suddenly understood. The men in black vehicles were not working alone. They had help from above. Lyra pulled her knees close to her chest, trembling. "They will take me back," she whispered. Daniel knelt beside her. "Take you back where?" Lyra shook her head quickly. "No, not home." Her voice became quieter. "Prison." Daniel stared at her. "Prison? For a child?" The scanning beams moved slowly across the market street now. One beam passed over the trash alley entrance. Daniel's heart began racing. If the light moved just a few meters more, it would reach them. Without thinking, Daniel grabbed an old metal sheet leaning against the wall and pulled it over them both. The thin metal blocked most of the light above. They sat there in complete silence. The blue beam passed over the alley. Slowly, then moved away. Daniel exhaled quietly. But when he looked at Lyra again, he noticed something strange. The silver lines under her skin were glowing brighter now. They pulsed slowly, like energy flowing through her body. Daniel frowned. "What are those?" he asked gently. Lyra looked down at her arms. For a moment, she seemed unsure how to answer. Then she whispered something that made Daniel's entire body freeze. "Royal blood." Daniel's eyes widened. The words from the hunter earlier suddenly echoed in his mind. The royal blood is nearby. He looked back at the frightened little girl hiding beside him, dirty, starving, trembling like a hunted animal. But inside her veins, something powerful was glowing. Something that entire ships were searching the city to capture. Daniel swallowed slowly. "What are you, Lyra?" he asked quietly. The girl looked at him. Her glowing golden eyes reflected the faint blue light from the sky. And then she said something that Daniel could barely believe. "I am the last princess." Daniel stared at the small girl beside him, trying to understand what he had just heard. "The last princess?" He repeated slowly. Lyra lowered her eyes. The silver lines under her skin were glowing softly now, like quiet lightning moving beneath her veins. For a moment, she said nothing. Above them, the giant spacecraft drifted slowly through the clouds, its scanning beams sweeping across the city again. The humming sound filled the night like a distant storm. Daniel leaned closer and spoke quietly. "Lyra, what do you mean by princess? Who are those hunters?" The girl hesitated, as if the words were difficult to say. Then she whispered, "They destroyed my home." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. Lyra slowly hugged her knees, her voice soft and shaking. "My people lived far from this world, beyond many stars. We were not warriors, we were guardians." Daniel listened carefully. "We protected something powerful," Lyra continued. "An ancient energy that kept balance between many worlds." Her golden eyes lifted toward him again. "But other empires wanted it." Daniel suddenly understood. "A war." Lyra's small hands clenched. "They attacked our planet. Their ships filled the sky, like the one above your city now. Her voice grew quieter. My family tried to protect the energy. My father, the king, sent me away before the final battle. Daniel felt a chill run through his body. You escaped? Lyra nodded slowly. A small ship carried me far away, hidden, protected. She paused, but they followed. Daniel looked toward the sky again. The massive alien ship hovered silently above the city. They've been chasing you this whole time, he said. Lyra nodded again. They want the royal blood. Daniel frowned. Why? What's so special about it? For a moment, Lyra did not answer. Then she slowly raised one trembling hand. The silver lines under her skin suddenly brightened. Faint glow filled the alley. Daniel watched in shock as the light gathered around her. Small fingers. And then something impossible happened. The trash bags beside them lifted slightly off the ground. Floating. Just a few inches. Daniel's eyes widened. Lyra quickly lowered her hand, and everything dropped back to the ground. The royal blood carries the ancient energy, she whispered. Daniel could barely breathe. They want to control it, she continued. If they capture me, they can unlock it. Daniel felt a heavy silence fall between them. This small, starving girl, the one crawling through garbage just minutes ago, she carried the power of an entire alien civilization. Suddenly, Lyra looked up sharply. Her eyes filled with panic again. They're getting closer. Daniel listened. The humming from above had changed. It was louder now, more focused. At the same moment, a bright beam of blue light suddenly shot down from the spacecraft and landed directly at the end of the alley. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. Beam slowly began moving toward them. Scanning, searching. Daniel grabbed Lyra's shoulder. We need to move. But before they could stand, something strange happened. Lyra suddenly froze. Her eyes widened. She stared directly at Daniel's face. Daniel blinked. What? But Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she leaned closer, studying him with deep confusion. Then, she whispered something that made Daniel's blood run cold. You. Daniel frowned. What about me? Lyra's glowing eyes searched his face again, almost like she was looking through him. Then she spoke in a trembling voice. You are not just human. Daniel felt a strange wave of disbelief. What are you talking about? But Lyra shook her head. No, I can feel it. The silver lines under her skin began glowing brighter again. Your blood, it carries the same energy. Daniel stared at her. That's impossible. But Lyra's voice became stronger now. My people can sense the ancient power. It flows in royal bloodlines. Daniel's mind raced. He had lived on Earth his entire life. He had worked simple jobs. He had never left this planet. How could I have alien blood? He asked. Lyra slowly pointed at him. Because you are connected to us. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Then Lyra said something that changed everything. Long ago, before the war, our explorers visited your world. Daniel's heart pounded. They hid among humans. Some of them stayed. They created families here, mixing our blood with yours. Daniel felt dizzy. You're saying my ancestors? Lyra nodded slowly. Were one of them. At that exact moment, the blue scanning beam moved directly over the alley. The metal sheet above them began to glow. The hunters had found them. Lyra looked at Daniel with urgency. Now they know. Daniel looked toward the sky. The massive alien ship above them suddenly shifted position. Its lights brightened, and a deep mechanical voice echoed through the city. Royal blood detected. Daniel felt a cold realization hit him. They weren't hunting just one target anymore. They were hunting two. The blue scanning beam grew brighter above the alley. Daniel felt the metal sheet above them vibrate as the powerful light passed through it. The huge alien ship hovering in the sky had already locked onto their position. Royal blood detected. A mechanical voice repeated across the city. Daniel's heart was pounding so hard, he could hear it in his ears. They were no longer searching randomly. Now they knew exactly where the targets were. Lyra grabbed Daniel's arm tightly. Her small hands were shaking, but her golden eyes were focused. "They will send hunters," she whispered quickly. "We must move now." Almost immediately, the beam above them disappeared. For a brief moment, the sky went dark again. Then the bottom of the alien ship opened. Daniel looked up and felt his stomach drop. Several small drop pods shot out of the ship like falling stars, racing toward the streets below. "They're coming," Lyra said. The pods slammed into the empty market road with heavy metallic crashes. The ground trembled beneath Daniel's feet. The pod doors burst open. Tall armored figures stepped out. They were not human. Their bodies were covered in dark metallic suits, and strange glowing weapons hummed in their hands. Hunters. Daniel had never seen anything so terrifying. Lyra looked toward the back of the alley, her breathing fast. There is no place to hide anymore. Daniel's mind raced. He was just an ordinary man, a dock worker who cleaned cargo ships every night. How could he protect a hunted alien princess? But then he remembered what Lyra had said. Your blood carries the same energy. Daniel looked down at his hands. "Lyra," he said quietly, "if what you said is true, maybe I can help." Lyra looked up at him with hope and fear mixed together. "The energy inside royal blood is powerful," she said, "but it only awakens when someone chooses to protect others." Daniel took slow breath. The sound of heavy footsteps was already echoing through the market. The hunters were getting closer. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. All his life, he had felt like an ordinary person. Invisible, unimportant. But now, a frightened child from another world was standing beside him, with no one else left to protect her. Daniel opened his eyes again. "Tell me what to do." Lyra stepped closer and gently placed her small glowing hand over Daniel's chest. The moment her hand touched him, a strange warmth spread through his body. The silver lines beneath her skin suddenly flared with bright light. And then something incredible happened. Daniel felt a surge of energy rush through his veins. It was not painful. It felt alive, like something ancient inside him had finally woken up. Daniel gasped as faint glowing patterns appeared across his arms, mirroring the silver lines on Lyra's skin. Lyra's eyes widened with amazement. "It's real," she whispered. The ancient energy had awakened. At that exact moment, the first hunter stepped into the alley. Its glowing weapon lifted toward them. But before it could fire, Daniel instinctively raised his hand. A powerful wave of energy exploded from his palm. The force blasted through the alley like a storm. The hunter was thrown backward, crashing into the market wall with a loud metallic impact. Daniel stared at his own hand in shock. "What did I just do?" Lyra smiled for the first time. "You protected me," she said softly. More hunters rushed toward the alley now, their weapons glowing brighter. But Daniel was no longer afraid. The ancient power flowing through him felt stronger with every second. He stepped forward, standing between Lyra and the approaching hunters. "You want the royal blood?" Daniel said firmly. The glowing lines across his arms shined brighter. "Then you'll have to go through me." The hunters opened fire. But the moment the energy bolts reached Daniel, a shimmering shield formed around him and Lyra. The blast scattered like sparks against invisible glass. Daniel raised both hands. Another surge of ancient energy exploded outward, sending the hunters flying across the market. The ground shook. Windows shattered. Within seconds, the powerful alien soldiers were lying motionless. High above the city, the giant spacecraft hesitated. Its scanning lights flickered uncertainly. The prey they had hunted across the stars was no longer helpless. Inside the alley, the glowing energy around Daniel slowly faded. His breathing was heavy, but his eyes were calm. Lyra stepped beside him. "The ship will leave now," she said. Daniel looked up at the sky. Slowly, the massive alien ship began pulling back into the clouds. Without its hunters, the mission had failed. Within minutes, the glowing lights vanished into the darkness of space. The city became quiet again. The danger was gone. Daniel sat down against the wall, exhausted. "I guess my life just became a lot more complicated," he said with a weak laugh. Lyra giggled softly. For the first time since he had met her, She looked like a normal child, but Daniel knew the truth. She was the last princess of a destroyed world. And now, she was completely alone. Daniel looked at her gently. So, what happens now? Lyra looked up at the stars. My people are gone, she said quietly. But one day, I must rebuild what was lost. Daniel nodded slowly. That sounds like a big job. Lyra smiled. Yes. Then she looked at him again. But I will not be alone anymore. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Oh? Lyra pointed at the faint glowing lines still visible on his arm. You are part of our bloodline now, she said. Daniel chuckled. So I guess that makes me... What? A royal bodyguard? Lyra laughed. No. Her golden eyes sparkled. In the moonlight, it makes you family. Daniel looked at the quiet sky one more time. Somewhere beyond those stars, an entire empire had fallen. But its last hope was standing beside him in a dark alley on Earth. Daniel stood up and offered his hand. Well, princess, he said with a small smile, let's go find you a better dinner. Lyra took his hand happily. And as they walked out of the alley together, neither of them knew what adventures waited in the future. But one thing was certain. The little alien girl who once ate scraps like a stray would one day rise again as a queen.